right, everybody. Wonderful. Give me 1 second. I'm doing something new here. I want to see if this works with our little... We're actually using the screen for the first time, other than just showing the panel, basically. We're getting to this in a second. So, thank you very much for coming out tonight. My name is Jan Rosner. I'm the host here tonight, the moderator. I'm also the CEO of One Earth Rising. One Earth Rising is a video game infrastructure company. We are providing infrastructure for game developers so we can provide and build the metaverses of the future, ownership models, and also interoperability. But also here, One Earth Rising is the creator of our Game Changers Collective series, which we do on a regular basis to break down interesting, hopefully interesting topics, but also complicated topics as like AI, Web3, and now finally for the first time video games to make it more accessible for the broader public and an audience that might not be so familiar with it. So tonight, box office versus boss battles, the gaming's Quiet Eclipse Over Hollywood. And I'm very, very happy that I was able to secure these wonderful ladies here on stage today because our industry suffers from too much testosterone often. So it's great to have two women here on the successful women here on stage and hopefully inspiring the next generations to come. I want to quickly go through a sequence here where we're going to start here on our panel for the next 45 minutes, talk amongst ourselves. And then we want to open this up for Q&A. So I encourage all of you, please think about some interesting questions that you want to ask. And there's no taboo. There's nothing that needs to be held back. So please, any question is...
You didn't tell us that part.
Yeah, here we go. So it's gonna be open. Before we go and start, and before I introduce my panelists here, quick thank you also to our sponsors. We have Flowcode as one of our sponsors. I want to highlight these wonderful, beautiful QR codes around the wall here. Please check them out. If you scan them, you can join our LinkedIn group, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to be aware and to get the newest information, to get the update LinkedIn group, then also access whoever is on LinkedIn, right, Jamie? Then also get access to people that have been here on the stage, and then also get the information when we have something new happening. So our next sponsor, which you hopefully already have in your hand here, is Wawa Water. And I would like to bring my friend Vincent on stage to talk about this in a brief introduction. An amazing bomber. I love this. Thank you, Vincent. Quick round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Vincent Negrezia. I am the CEO and founder of Wawa Water. Wawa Water is kind of a one-of-a-kind. It's the first integrated beverage and sound experience using a very unique combination of a lightly caffeinated sparkling water with binaural beats of sound frequencies and music to be able to increase our productivity in ways of increasing our ability to focus. So Wawa Water has 45 milligrams of natural caffeine from green coffee beans, equivalent to about a half a cup of coffee, and 100 milligrams of L-theanine, which is an amino acid that helps reduce our anxiety but increase our focus. And then on the back of the can, if you turn it around, you'll see a QR code with a big set of headphones on it that if you scan, it'll take you to a landing page. We'll ask you which platform do you use, whether it be Spotify, iTunes, Pandora. Then it takes you to a playlist of Wawa Beats, which gives you different tracks to activate different brain waves to get you into a desired mind state. So you could drink Wawa Water while listening to Wawa Beats to increase your ability to focus. So I hope you enjoy, and Jan and everyone, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. So thank you very much, Vince. I love that. And don't forget also your reusable straw that comes with your can. Then I want to thank All in All is a executive and also startup community and great events, startup breakfast, fundraising breakfast, and so forth. All in All is one of our partners. And then obviously here, the space that we're in, and I'm biased here, I've been with this beautiful space for such a long time. Spring Place, a private membership club that is providing us with wonderful space, but also a great community of entrepreneurs and founders and investors and all of that. So if you're interested, also again, sign up for our newsletter. You get an introduction and also an invitation from our chief here of our membership, Susanna. So now, without further ado, I want to quickly introduce my panel to all of you. So we have this wonderful panel, and Jamie, you have been a good friend of mine for a long time, so finally we get also to work together. So very happy to have you here. Jamie Hyder, actor, 36 episodes of Law and Order, but more importantly in this context here also, Lieutenant Nora Salter in Call of Duty, and then also the female voice of Need for Speed Heat. Is that correct? Yes. And going more, thank you very much for being here on stage. And I'll give you in a second the chance to introduce more about your background. And then we have also Claire Nance here, who is the global head of communication and also industry marketing at Activision Blizzard. So a round of applause, please, for the two ladies here on our stage. So I want to kick this off. And before I do, quick note, we are recording the session, so if you don't like that, now is the chance to leave the room. We will talk amongst ourselves here, so please be kind and respectful. And then to our panelists here, please just be full of wisdom and short in your answers, please. So with that, let's kick it off. I would love to start the question and say, Claire, you first. How did you start in gaming? And also, what was the first and most favorite game that you ever played?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the first game that I ever played. I grew up with, my grandfather had like an Atari, like he had a full game setup. And I actually cannot remember the names of some of the, what would be very retro games now that I played. But one of the first things I ever bought was a Nintendo Game Boy. And the first game I played on Nintendo Game Boy, this is not cool at all. It was Kirby's Dream Land. I don't know if anyone ever has played Kirby. Great. I love, kind of Kirby and that type of thing. And then I moved on to slightly cooler games like Donkey Kong and Super Mario. But very first game that I remember the name of that I ever played was Kirby's Dream Land on Nintendo Game Boy. I had a red one. And how I got into gaming was a little bit fortuitous. My background is I've worked in media, entertainment, advertising, that kind of space, basically my whole career. And I recognized that I've been at Activision Blizzard almost 5 years now, and I recognized about 5 years ago the momentum that gaming was kind of gaining in terms of the conversation and where it was in the entertainment landscape. And it was something I'd always loved, as I said, with my Kirby's Dream Land and my Nintendo Game Boy. And it was kind of through a mutual friend that I actually ended up at Activision Blizzard, but it felt very much like the stars were aligning a little bit, given that I'd kind of been in the entertainment, media, advertising space and had such an affinity for gaming.
Jamie, same question.
Well, I had a babysitter's house I went to every day after school when I was younger, and they had an Atari, and I remember playing that, jumping over the swamp with the vine and trying not to get eaten by the crocodiles and all that. But it was a more part of my life, I think, when Super Nintendo and all of that came out, and my friends and I would get the headsets. And unlike now, you would wear headsets and sit in the same room as the person you're talking to on the headsets instead of speaking to someone across the world. So my friends and I would play 007 with these little headsets on, Donkey Kong and Super Mario and Mario Kart, all of that. So I kind of grew up in that era of games. And then I got started in gaming back, this might have been 2000. I don't know if it was 14 or 15, when I did my first game, Killzone. Killzone Shadowfall was the first game I'd ever done. It was also the first time when a gaming company had actually hired SAG actors to come in and portray the characters. So this was kind of the beginning of the full performance capture movement. And that was the first game that I ever auditioned for and the first game I ever got to perform in. And that kind of started my performance capture aspect of my career.
I love that. And before I go more in detail into this, because I would love to understand better how this has evolved over time, also in both of your areas, I would like to see a show of hands. Who you guys think, or who thinks that the movie industry is bigger than the music industry? Movie bigger than music. Box office. All right? Who thinks that the video game industry is bigger than the movie industry? All right. Okay. I mean, it's kind of like a setup here also without. So I wanted to do this quickly, and I need to work on this a little bit better to make this more impactful. I wanted to show these numbers because the majority of people that we talk to on our business side are blown away when we tell them those numbers. It's like $185 billion, the entertainment, largest entertainment industry in the world. And also, we have 35 years is the average age of the gamers, and we have 48% women. I have to highlight that is including a lot of also casual games on mobile phones. So everybody who thinks like, how the hell is that happening? So I don't play games. So, well, if you have Candy Crush on your phone, you do play video games. And so that's a part of it. And so, you know, part of our movement here is also to normalize that. So that is not a red flag when you say you're playing a video game. But obviously everything has evolved over time. A lot has happened in the gaming industry. Jamie, when you started, what was for you a change, or how do you see the industry changing? Could you let us a little bit into even how it works as an actor to be in a video game like Call of Duty, for example?
Well, one of the biggest changes that occurred and allowed for me to be a part of the industry is that in the past, games were created and the characters in games were created kind of in a disjointed process where there was one person who came in and did all the voiceover. Then there's someone else who came in, maybe a stunt performer, former military, or an athlete who would come in and do all of the physical performance for it. And then you would have the animated version that would exist in the game that would look like whatever they decided the character should look like. Nowadays, that process, and back when I did Killzone, that process, as opposed to being something called motion capture, is now called performance capture, because all of those elements are being performed at the same time by one person. And in my case, you know, you have a helmet on your head with a camera that sits in front of you and records all of your facial expressions and movements, because this character also now looks like me. So all of my relative facial movements are being reproduced in the game. And my voice is being recorded on little microphones that look like antennas kind of hanging off the front of my face. And then my suit I'm wearing is, you know, covered in balls that are projecting my motion to all these cameras around me. So you're taking all these aspects that used to be separate, putting them together in one performance and assigning that performance to an actor. And not only has that kind of evolved, that part of the process evolved, but also the way that you play games and the customization of the type of player that you are and how you're able to play the games differently, that's changed. You're no longer fixed during cut cinematic scenes. The player can walk around the room and choose their perspective and decide, are they the kind of player that walks over and goes, whoa, I can move that, I can pick that up? Or are they the player that's objective focused and, you know, move right through? When we create the games, we have to keep all of those scenarios in mind and play for every single one of those options, so that no matter what kind of a gamer you are, you're going to get the experience that you want. So we perform every one of those options, the fast option, the slow option, the reminders, the slowdowns. Those are all things that we have to account for when we're creating the game, because now the players have a much more unique perspective than they used to.
That's why also, if you then think of a budget of Grand Theft Auto 5 being like $264 million, right? It, you know, becomes more clear where all of that money goes to, and also the world that you create where you have to anticipate all the different actions by the player, right? Claire, on your field, obviously there's, you know, a different aspect of the gaming world, but how has the gaming world evolved for you since you started?
Yeah, I think there's two key things that I want to touch on. The first is the technological advancements of gaming. And you touched on it a little bit earlier when you mentioned mobile, and I do think mobile gets left out of the conversation around gaming a lot. But the advancements that's happened in mobile technology and how that has created a level of accessibility to gaming that didn't exist previously, I think is really huge. And when you talk about, you know, the 3.2 billion gamers, you know, part of that is because more people are able to access gaming through, their mobile phone. We talk about, you've got a gaming console in your pocket, as I do right now. But it's removed one of the barriers to entry, which was, having to purchase, a console or hardware to be able to access games. Now, everyone can do that on a device that they, already have with them. But it's also the way that mobile games have been designed in a way to make them more accessible so that there's less of a learning curve, so that it's easier to start playing a game on your phone and understand the gaming mechanics, whereas, some of the console games and more involved games, that there is a steeper learning curve. But so mobile provides that entry point. I think the other thing is at a cultural level. And again, I'm going to reference your slide, which is now gone, but a lot of the numbers
I'll bring it back up.
resonated with me. But when you talk about the average age of a gamer, and you've got 35 years, but you think about the first generation that kind of grew up gaming, and you're probably looking at like that geriatric millennial, which I can use that term because I am one of those, or Gen X. So probably a little bit older than that, 35 years. But that's the first generation that really grew up and had gaming as part of their life from when they were, when they were kids. And like we kind of talked about it earlier, like we remember playing Atari and that type of thing. This generation is now growing up, and they've had gaming as a constant source of entertainment throughout their entire life, and they are now having children. And they are now introducing their children to, this pastime that they loved and they enjoyed. And so you're seeing, this increase in younger generations are gaming more, because there's kind of this through line where this, like I said, the geriatric millennials and the Gen X are kind of growing up and bringing this gaming with them and influencing those around them as well. That's, of course, not to discount that there are older gamers and there are people who've discovered gaming later in life, but I do think that those two things have been really instrumental to why gaming is so popular and becoming much more part of mainstream entertainment culture right now.
Yeah, I had the conversation here earlier at the bar where it was very interesting for us to see as a company also how COVID actually happened to influence this. And not only that, obviously everybody was at home and we had an increase in revenues because, well, people played video games, but it became also more acceptable to play video games. And people got more, oh, you game too? And you game too? Oh, wow. Okay, well, I do too. Sorry, yeah. I didn't feel I could admit that.
One of the really interesting things I think about COVID and gaming, and there was, there's a lot of narratives around that, but we actually did some research around who was gaming during COVID and why we had this increase. And one of the big takeaways that we found was it wasn't people discovering gaming for the first time. It was actually people revisiting gaming. It was people who maybe they hadn't quite had the time before, they maybe, hadn't played in a while, and they were actually revisiting this.
My husband and I are guilty of that.
Yeah, this form of entertainment. So it wasn't it wasn't this new thing by any stretch, but it was having the time and having the motivation and the reasons to reconnect with it. And one of the other things we've seen is that a lot of those habits have continued, kind of post-lockdowns and as things have reopened. There was a narrative that once the world reopens, that's it, everyone's throwing their gaming consoles out the window. And that didn't happen because people reconnected with this form of entertainment and they've continued to do so post.
Wonderful. Jamie, you're an actor, so obviously Call of Duty is not the only thing that you've performed in. Also, you were first officer, then detective Kat Tammin, right? And Law and Order next to Ice and Mariska. And how much or how, if at all, has the gaming experience, the gaming actor experience helped you in your performance as an actor? Or do you have, and we both know that Ice is also a very involved person in the gaming space, how many have you seen in the success story coming out of gaming and breaking into the acting space? Is that something that actually helps you to become a better actor or changes your acting?
There's such different mediums because in gaming, you don't have the props, the costumes, the set. You don't have any of that around you. I often liken it to playing make-believe in your backyard where, before every day they would walk around with a screen and show you in real time what the world would look like in the game. there's a window over here, there's a table here, and there'd be a folding table in the room, but in the game it would look like a big, beautiful desk or something. And they'd basically show you as if, it would just look like this room in here, but they would show you what it would look like in the world of the game, and you would kind of commit that to memory as if you're saying, okay, over here is lava. We all agree that part of the backyard is lava. That's base over there. That's your fort. That's my fort. You commit it to memory, and then you do the scene. And everything is make-believe. You're taking a tissue box that maybe is the same shape as a hat you need to wear, and you're putting that on your head for a scene where you need to wear a hat, and you're putting it on and just letting it fall off your helmet and keep walking, and so there's a lot of make-believe that has to go into it because you don't have all those other tools because of the technology. So when you're working on camera, I think you learn to be really grateful for the fact that you're in the environment and, that's being portrayed. And I'm in the squad room and I'm wearing a police uniform and I'm, or whatever Kat's outfit is, I've got a badge and all this other stuff. You don't have those same tools when you're working on a game.
It sounds so much easier all of a sudden, right? Otherwise, you're basically in a constant improv theater all the time.
It's a lot. And I watch some really incredible actors have a hard time adjusting to the medium. I think that it would almost be an easier transition to go from gaming, into straight acting, but it takes some getting used to.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So I want to throw a couple of more numbers at you because they're always mind-blowing. And forgive me if you fact-check me, those numbers seem to change on a daily basis. But I think Call of Duty, if I recall correctly, has about 90 million monthly active players. Fortnite around 200 million active players monthly. So it's a huge amount. And so, obviously this is a market, when we just looked at the numbers, 35 years old is the average age of a gamer. That's a market that brands should be interested in. And so, Claire, I wanted to ask you, do you have some good examples of brands that did good integration into the video game world?
Yeah,
if you could share some of it.
Definitely. And this is kind of the world that I play in. A lot of my role is working with brands and advertisers and helping them understand the opportunity that exists within gaming and how they can activate within gaming. And I'm going to, of course, give an example that my team worked on. So Candy Crush is, which you referenced earlier, which I appreciate, is one of the titles that Activision Blizzard publishes. We actually did a partnership with the Prada Candy fragrance. And so you can see straight away, you can see the synergy there, Candy Crush, Prada Candy. You've got that really nice kind of the brand alignment. But we did an in-game integration where we created a bespoke mini game that used some of the Candy Crush IP combined with the Prada Candy fragrance bottle. And so you kind of play this mini game kind of within the Candy Crush environment. And at the end, players could unlock a free sample of the Prada Candy fragrance. And so this campaign was super successful for a number of reasons. One is that the way it was integrated into the game was in a way that was authentic to the game, both in terms of the gameplay, it used the IP, it wasn't disruptive, it was an opt-in experience. So very much any kind of integration that brands do should be player first. But the other piece was because it had the reward at the end of it, which was, as I said, was the fragrance. And in terms of results, this campaign ran Thanksgiving last year, and Prada had 40,000 samples of the perfume to give away. They were redeemed within 24 hours, which was pretty outstanding. But it shows when you do an integration right, where you've got the right brand in the right space, again, right audience, and you do it in the right way, because that's really critical. There are some in-game integrations that perhaps don't have that player-first mindset, but it can be really, really impactful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's so interesting to see that still, going back to our stats earlier, and the conversation around there is not the recognition in the gaming space. So many brands still lose out on opportunity because they just don't see the opportunity, right? And that actually leads me to the next question, where I wanted to ask you, Jamie, the role of a game actor. So do you think that the film industry gets more, equal, or less, or I should say rather the video game industry gets less recognition as an actor when you're in that space than opposed to the compared to the video game? To the film industry. Where do you think the two stand?
Well, I had been in LA for, probably 7 years, 5 to 7 years before I started auditioning for video games, before it was even an option. I still think it's kind of uncharted waters for a lot of people. And I've realized that because people I know who are prominent and far more successful than me have come to me to say, I got this video game. What's different about doing games? I'm nervous. I've never done one before. Or people who are starting to audition for them who don't realize or hadn't realized that it was a viable path in our career field. People always thought just television and film. Video games, especially when I worked on Call of Duty, for instance, at the time there was not a lot of union regulations around video games at all. But, shout out to Activision and the people who I worked with, because they offered me an incredible contract that was unheard of at the time. They compensated me for my likeness. They compensated me for things that in the past, those contracts those aspects were never mandatory. And that really paved the way for the union to start getting involved and say, all right, we need to start demanding these things, because video games are, in fact, a viable part of our industry. To work on Call of Duty, I did about 80 days of shooting in an 18-month period. If you think about it, a film script is for 2.5 hours. You're talking about 120, 130, 40 pages, something like that. A video game is a 1,000-page script, because that's 8 hours of dialogue, entertainment, action, options, variables, all of that. So, it's a serious thing. And as an actor, it's absolutely fantastic work to get.
I remember you had to live on aircraft carriers and fly some aircrafts and so forth. Right? It's tough. Yeah.
Yes, some really awful perks.
Ah, yes. I want to also talk about that little tiny elephant in the room, which is a little acquisition that just recently happened of some $69-ish billion through Microsoft. We talked about this already. We can't really go into any details, but what does that mean? What signal effect does that have for the video game industry?
I think it kind of picks up on a theme that I touched on earlier, which is around accessibility. And I think the industry is increasingly think about how can we create greater access to people to gaming and remove some of these barriers to entry. And you're seeing some of the shifts in even like the economic models around gaming, where, previously it was, you pay $60, $70 for a game title, you have your console that you've paid however much for at home, and that was the economics around it. And now we're seeing this shift towards kind of free-to-play titles, not just on mobile either, but games like Fortnite and Call of Duty Warzone, and increasingly a shift as well towards like cloud gaming. And some of the technology, I think, needs to catch up a little bit there to make sure there's a seamless experience. But I do think that's the direction that the industry is heading towards, is about this idea of, for players especially, creating a level of accessibility so more people can game and access it without needing, some of those upfront purchases that were required in the past.
That actually leads me directly into the next question. What gets you most excited? Looking into the future, what is coming next? You obviously also have like probably the backdoor insights here. What are you most excited about?
I think I'm most excited about, I think there is a shift taking place, which like we're kind of in the middle of right now, where this idea that gaming is no longer this niche activity. And I mean, it's not. And like you talked about the numbers earlier. And I think increasingly we're seeing folks start to understand that. And that kind of gets me really excited, because I think the more that there is that mindset shift, I think the more we're going to see creativity and ideas and expansion in terms of what gaming means and what gaming looks like. I think the other piece is obviously like the technological aspect. And so as technology advancements increase and there's more that happens in that space, gaming is going to be one of the key beneficiaries of it. So we kind of get a taste now for what it is like to, experience a virtual world, so to speak, through gaming. But the potential for what can happen there, again, as those future advancements in technology is huge. So I'm excited to see where that can go as well.
Jamie, what about you? From an actor's perspective or from a gamer's perspective?
I mean, I'm excited for the things I don't even know about yet. You know, when you think about a film like Avatar that wasn't possible prior to it being made, you know, the performance capture technology, the same technology we use to make something like Call of Duty is the technology that made Avatar possible. And that didn't exist for very long before that. So I think that there's also the capability for games to have a healing component. I think there's a mental health aspect that is going to come to play with the type of technology that is being developed. I think that, you know, as much as it can be a way to blow off steam, I think it can be also a way to invigorate or a way to help you soothe or you know, there's other ways to use it. I mean, the technology we use in gaming, as you know, it helps keep us safe with our military. You know, they're using PlayStation controllers to control drones because that's what these operators are most comfortable with and can be most adept using. You know, there's things like that are kind of interesting to see where, you know, the chicken and the egg, where these capabilities and technologies are kind of going at the same time.
Yeah, direct path from your basement directly into a little container in Nevada. Yeah, it's fantastic. No, I agree with you, specifically also on the forefront, the new technologies that are coming out, community building. There's so many also great events happening in VR that are coming out now more and more. For us now, you know, from our perspective, the interoperability between of assets, I mean, Need for Speed being an example, now speaking more and more to gamers that love racing. In the future, user-generated content, bringing content as a, you know, you love cars, you want to just build cars, somebody else can race them, just bring the car into the game, or a racetrack. You can design that, bring it into the game and just rent it out to somebody. These opportunities that when they come to life, we're seeing much more and more coming in the very near future. Very excited for that. Want to see with you from a brand perspective, want to ask you both kind of like about an entryway. So we have, I'm sure, entrepreneurs sitting here thinking maybe about the gaming industry. What would your recommendation be, Claire, to how do you start? Obviously talking to you is one start, but how do you think about approaching a game context as a brand?
I think, so two things I would say. And I think the first is gaming itself is, I think, recognizing that it's not a monolith. Right? There's so many different forms of gaming, there's different platforms, there's different genres of games, there's different audiences you can reach. So I think that actually is something that for brands can be a little bit intimidating, because if you don't fully understand, you know, kind of the nuances of it. But I think the critical piece for folks that are interested in getting involved in gaming is what I would say for anyone when it comes to marketing, which is knowing upfront what your objectives are, who your audience is that you're trying to reach. Because if you know that, that is going to help guide you on which type of gaming you should, you know, kind of approach or think about or activate in. Should it be mobile? Should it be a specific type of game? Should you be looking at console? You know, there's esports, there's streaming, there's creative. Like, there's so many options. But I think knowing, like, what is it that you're trying to achieve up front is the most important piece and can help kind of be that guide. The second thing, and I mean, you kind of said it, like the, you know, work with us, but I would say if you don't know, you know, a lot about gaming, and again, it can be intimidating, find partners and work with partners who do and can be that guide for you. And yes, it's people like publishers like Activision Blizzard, but there are also a lot of, you know, other great publishers and other great agencies and folks out there who really know the space, and work with people who know the gaming space and can be that kind of guide for you so that you do so in a way that's authentic, that's player first, that fits right with the game, and that also is going to meet the objectives that you want.
Understand your customer, right? If I understand you correctly. Jamie, if somebody would like to start as an actor in maybe directly in the gaming space, what would you recommend? Where to start?
Well, I think that you need to set yourself up for success. And to do that, you know, I touched on earlier how even the greatest actor can have a hard time getting over the technology hurdle. You know, trying to act with a camera this directly in front of your face, 2 microphones here. You don't have a big camera somewhere else. You have 80 other cameras around you in the space recording you in 360. You know, going and doing a workshop that allows you to become familiar with the technology prior to putting yourself in a position of an audition or something like that. That's always going to help you feel more comfortable. Also, understanding that it's a very physical medium. So certain body language is going to translate better than other body language. So when you go into audition, having a lot of postures and things that close your body off, those aren't going to read as well in a video game where you have a lot of moving parts and you're trying to get a point across to someone. So having more open body postures and changing your levels and making it visually interesting because you're no longer held to a fixed focus. So you have to draw focus. It's much more like theater, thinking about it like theater in the round where you're performing to all sides at once. Just being aware of those differences. But also I think, and this is an overarching principle, I think in gaming in general, is taking it seriously. It's a serious art form. As an actor, you need to put as much integrity into it as you would for anything else. And I think technology sometimes distances us from humanity and the way that we think about it. But in this case, that's what makes games continue to improve, is creating these well-rounded characters that these players are excited to play as and with throughout the process.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing these insights. We are very close to the finish of our little panel series but amongst us. So I encourage all of you to think about a couple of questions that you want to ask. Before we do, I want to ask both of you specifically about the topic women in gaming and women in the gaming industry. And do you see specific opportunities? Challenges are there, we know that. If you want to point some out, please do. But do you see specific opportunities for women in the gaming industry? Claire?
Yeah, I think there's been a shift, and I think there is... I see this in my day job where there's a greater understanding of the importance of having diversity of thought, voices, all those types of things in terms of, whether it's game creation, whether it's, game marketing or what have you, and how important that is. And so I think there is more than ever the opportunity to have, women in the industry. And traditionally, maybe it has been seen as a male-dominated industry, but I know I work with so many great women, in my company, within the industry. There's so many great, women in gaming organizations as well. So, I know I see it in, some of the games that we make, this recognition and understanding of who the gaming audience is as well, and this shift away from the stereotype of teenage boys in the basements wearing headsets, and greater understanding, even with the statistic you showed earlier about 48% of gamers being female. So I think the shift is happening. There is always more that can be done, but I do think it's moving in the right direction.
Wonderful. Jamie, do you see it the same way?
I do, and I think that as more women are portrayed in gaming, it allows more women to feel comfortable in gaming as well. When I did Call of Duty, I was the first female lead that they ever had in the game, and I was the player's partner. So all of these, men who are used to playing this game with a male voice in their ear who are giving them instructions and telling them what to do, there was some concern that it might be received differently. And it wasn't. And maybe it's helps that I have a deep, raspy voice. But no. But one of the really impactful things about what I got to do was represent an elite armed forces member as a female in the game. And that's one reason why the military, I started to work with them from an outreach perspective, because they found it to be very valuable for these people to see this character, even though she's fictional, portraying an elite soldier. They found it positively impacted women's experience in the military in real life. They found that it made it easier for these men to accept women in these positions simply by virtue of having this relationship with them in the gaming industry, which for me as an actor was, makes me emotional thinking about it, that you can have that kind of a real life impact on people who are out there doing what our armed forces and veterans do. So representation matters. And I know we talk about that, but it allows that 48% to happen, so taking what some people see as a risk by representing women in these games and in this industry and putting that forward, it isn't a risk. You're simply helping build an already powerful and existing group of customers and players.
And I think women have been gaming for a long time. I mean, we talked about it earlier when we both said that we've been gaming since we were young. I just think that previously there maybe wasn't as much of a safe space for them to express, and it wasn't as much a part of the narrative and understanding of who the gaming audience is. But women playing video games is nothing new. That's been happening for a long time. The shift comes from the recognition and the understanding and the safety now for women to play games and be themselves.
Yeah, so that's why we were going to do more and more of these panels to break the stigma down and really just allow people to enjoy gaming on a world stage. So this leads me to a tradition of this show. Whoever has listened to the show here a couple of times who knows that I always ask my guests to end with one takeaway sentence, basically, that if nothing else, what do you want the audience to take away from this evening here tonight? And we start with Jamie. What would you let the people know that they should remember? If anything else, after drinking at the bar, everything is gone. This is the one thing I need to remember.
I think we said it in a couple different ways, but that video games are an art form. They're no different than sculpture or anything else. It's just a different set of tools with a little bit of a different outcome. But the creativity that goes into it and the individuals and the artists who create them, you can't deny that video games are an art form.
For me, it's that gaming isn't niche. It's actually a mainstream form of entertainment, and I think the numbers speak to that. And that gaming isn't the future of entertainment; it's very much the here and now.
I tend to say the largest mainstream subculture that exists, I believe, right? So the other tradition that we have is a recommendation. So if you could share, Claire, what is your recommendation of a book, a podcast, a game, anything that you have in petto which you like our audience to look at?
Yes. I'm going to admit my biases here completely up front, because the book I'm going to recommend was actually written by my boss, who is not here. So this is not me brown-nosing. But it's called Get in the Game by Jonathan Stringfield. And it is about, it's really a primer for brands, advertisers, folks that are interested in understanding the gaming space and how they can activate within it from a business perspective. And it really contextualizes gaming and has a lot of the history of gaming to, I think, help understand kind of where we're at in the here and now today. So Get in the Game by Jonathan Stringfield.
Wonderful. Jamie?
I have a game recommendation. I'm 99.9% sure you can still download this. I should have double checked it, but there's a game called Entwined, and it was created in a collaboration between Sony and students at Carnegie Mellon back in like 2016, maybe something like that. And it was a game that they created for people to play after they come off of an hour or so of playing a first-person shooter, intense ass game, we're getting all revved up and now you got to go to bed. So Entwined is this game that has the most beautiful colors and sound, and you have a bird character and a fish character, and each one has their own little joystick, and you kind of take them through these pathways together, and it's got kind of a narrative to it, but it's a soothing game, and it's made that way. The sounds have been scientifically engineered, the colors, all of it comes together and just it creates this really calming effect. And I highly recommend it to kind of come down out of just screaming from behind a blown up car for 2 hours at your buddies. Entwined. So it's a cool game.
Very good.
Very
Definitely
simple.
Good recommendation for a lot of people that come to mind on my side here. My recommendation is Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. Definitely, if you want to understand the gaming industry and you want to learn a little bit more how some of the most renowned games have been created, like most of them are indie games, and like really by people in the dorm, and they became just super hits by accident. It's super interesting. It really introduces you to the gaming industry from the get-go, and it's fun to read. It's really great. So that, first and foremost, a round of applause. Thank you very much for this first round here. Thank you very much. now we want to give you the chance also to drink a little water if you want to. You know, you're very welcome to open these cans. And hand this over to our wonderful Bridget and Bronson here with the microphones, our very own, and to answer any questions that the audience has. So please ask away, raise your hand, whoever has a question. We're happy to answer them if we can.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much for this great talk. My name is Carlos. A statement and a question. I grew up playing games in the 90s, and like Final Fantasy VIII was one of my first games, and I remember people were starting to speak about games as a cinematic experience, and that game brought me to tears. It was incredible. So it's very nice to hear this being spoken about outright. I have the Gen AI question. So, I work in consulting, and everyone's buzzed with generative AI, and gaming is at the forefront of it. What are you guys hearing in terms of how this technology is being spoken about in terms of the creative process and just in general within your industry?
You might have a more favorable response.
I mean, I think I would just say it's still really early days in terms of, full integration. And so I feel like it's still very much at that exploratory phase. And I think it's very much with the viewpoint of optimization at this point rather than creation. In terms of what that looks like in the future, I don't have much of a viewpoint on, but we're kind of thinking about what are the ways that we can optimize some of the elements of game design in a way that makes sense. But I think it's early days. So sorry, it's not a super detailed answer, but.
I think from a performance perspective, video games are the one area where I feel like using AI is actually moving backwards, because in the past it was all artificially created, all of the way that the characters look, sounded, the world, all of that, kind of, I know it's not the exact same as artificial intelligence, but I think it's an industry where bringing in the human performance element has elevated it as a performance and as an art medium. I have no doubt that AI will allow people to customize their player experience in a really cool way. But from a performance perspective, I think that the more that you incorporate AI as a performer, you're going to lose some of the nuance that I think has made games become so much more, heart-wrenching, and you care when someone dies and your teammate's gone, That was all created by a computer in the past, and I think using humans now is what's made it a little bit more personal.
I would love to chime in here as well. I think I agree with you on the performer side. I think for the experience side, there's a lot to come. The obvious challenges and the obvious downsides with creatives maybe losing also jobs, etc., and so forth. That's one part of it. The opportunities that will come probably a little bit later, where we see new game designs happening because we have now opportunities to create worlds in a way and experience an individual experience for any individual player in a holistically new way. I think that's where we see new games emerge that we haven't even thought about yet. So that's what I'm excited about. All the negative things, obviously, unfortunately, come sometimes with that. But it's definitely an exciting time. Thank you for the question.
All right, I have two questions, one for Claire and one for Jamin. So for Claire, my question is, why do you think gaming is perceived as a large sort of subculture, since it's bigger than all the other art forms out there? Why do you think it's perceived as a subculture? And for Jamin, how do you prepare for your role as a lead military personnel, a female military personnel? So that's the question.
Yeah, I guess to understand your question, why it's perceived as a subculture versus like fully mainstream. Yeah, I think that comes back to I feel like I'm a broken record, the accessibility piece a little bit, in terms of, again, when you think back, 10 plus years ago, the entry point for gaming involved some level of investment. And even when you think back to like the arcades of the 80s and that type of thing, that there wasn't that seamless way to access gaming the way that there has been with other forms of entertainment, like, TV and movies and that type of thing. So I think there's some of that has kind of, I guess, stayed with gaming, but now we're starting to see that shift where, because there's a greater level of accessibility, I think that's why we're seeing that. And there's a lot of stereotypes that I don't necessarily know why they've stuck so much, like the teenage boy in the basement and this idea that gaming is this very solitary activity. And like one of the things that we've seen, and we kind of started to touch on this, but we didn't quite get there, was, gaming actually provides this level of social connection that other forms of entertainment don't provide in the same way. And that was, again, one of the reasons why during the pandemic, like, gaming really took off, because, you're having this ability. I was playing Animal Crossing with, my brother who lives on the other side of the world. Like, our characters would meet on the island and we would be like chatting, and so like that was a way for us to interact that wasn't as straightforward as like texting or calling. You're kind of interacting within the game. And so there's this huge social element to gaming that I think gets kind of glossed over and missed by, again, this stereotype of it being this very solitary activity, teenage boy basement kind of vibe. And I don't quite know why those stereotypes have stuck so much, but again, I do think we're seeing the shift away from that. Yeah.
There is a huge percentage of the gaming population that are active duty and or veteran members of our armed forces. And part of, our responsibility as actors is to really get our portrayal of them correct. It's out of respect that we're trying to understand one tiny percentage of their experience and portray it on this worldwide scale. I've always been fortunate that the people I've worked for have also taken that goal seriously. So with Call of Duty, for instance, the entire cast, we had an entire week of Navy SEAL training with 2 retired SEALs who took us through tactical and weapons training so that we could move as a unit and carry our weapons and our body language and all of that tactically correct, based on the amount of threat that was assessed in the room we're about to walk into, whether you're at a low ready, a medium ready, or high ready with your weapon, what makes sense in that particular environment. Because we really wanted it to be as much of an homage to those who are playing the game who've actually had these experiences as possible, while also recognizing that it's entertainment. But it is really important to the people who make these games on the performance and on the technology side to get these experiences right. So a lot of resources go into giving us the proper training, using properly weighted weapons, airsoft weapons, so that our body language and everything really matches, what the situation would entail in real life. So there's a good amount of that, a good amount of outreach with the military in those situations as well. Same way if you're playing an NBA game, you're going to have people out there who look like they know how to play basketball, and they're probably way better at basketball than I ever was at this actual military training. But, those things are important to the people who make the games.
I want to just add a little to Claire here. I think one of the reasons, this is my own opinion, is what we touched on earlier, is the industry has evolved so fast. So many of the people that have, especially now children also, might be stuck in this whole mental case, so to speak, that there's no value in this old clunky game that you play there. But these worlds that are existing now, there's so much more, almost, the logical progression from a movie, actually. You play your own story. So I think we're getting there. I think that things are changing. I mentioned earlier also the pandemic was a big driver of that. But I think also in the future we are seeing much more happening through the integration of esports. That becomes much more popular, and through that, hopefully, we get more recognition also in the general gaming space. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the question. Gentleman over here, or lady over there.
No, lady, and then
Here you go.
Hi. My question is, I think, mostly for Claire. Since the gaming industry is getting more and more seen as such a powerhouse, it must be remarked by the political sphere. So I was wondering, in advertising, if you see political parties, for instance, getting more involved as clientele, and how you deal with that, because it's kind of polarizing as well. I would like to know a little bit more.
Yeah.
Joe and Kamala in Animal Crossing, huh? Did you see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
I did see that, yeah. And look, I can only speak to our approach, to Activision Blizzard's approach. I can't speak to other publishers or their approach. We don't run political ads within our games. We do run ads that might be related to things like, health services or public style announcements. During the pandemic, we partnered with the World Health Organization for a really cool campaign. They did called Play a Part Together, and that involved running some of that messaging within our games. But again, our policy is we don't run political ads. But again, I don't want to speak for other companies and whether they do things differently. So not a super interesting answer, but that's our approach.
The next question, I think, was here for the gentleman over there. Yes.
So my question is for Jamie, coming to you as an artist, because what you brought up was something very interesting in terms of the way that you do poses and the way that you go back and forth between acting. And I'm asking in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you value the collaboration between artist and actor in terms of studying the poses and, kind of describing how you want to exaggerate each pose for a particular character that you're acting for?
It's a very collaborative effort, because you're working within the performance capture team, and they've got a certain set of things that they want you to achieve in the game. Then you've also got the cinematic team who's working with the cut scenes and making sure that all of that is actually being framed out like you would have seen in a film. They're deciding the perspective and the lighting and the way everything's going to look. And then you also have the animation team who's present. And they're there to make sure that whatever you're doing in the performance capture aspects will be able to blend into the animation component. So there's certain things as an actor that you have to do to make that easier for them. You kind of come in with your ideas, and then they'll tell you how and if that is going to work within the technology. You may want to, in this scene, you just saw somebody that you thought died in battle. Well, you can't really hug them, because otherwise your Velcro is going to stick together and you're going to be going when you pull apart from one another. So you have to figure out another way in that case to show intimacy or to show love. Again, it's really about your imagination and having it all in your head, so that when all of these other aspects that are less human and more technology related are getting involved, that you don't lose the aspect of your performance that makes your character who they are.
That Velcro story will stick with me. Very nice. Thank you. Great question. I think here, the gentleman over there.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Akeem, and I'm a filmmaker, and I write scripts. And I understand the industry is changing, where you can write scripts also for gaming now, because it's like a movie. But not to be the party pooper, what does the panel think about gaming addiction and how that teenage boys sitting there playing games because, the flashing lights and the intensity just keeps them on the game. And next thing you know, he's a 40-year-old kid in the basement still and haven't really accomplished anything. So what do you think about that? And also, one more question about how gaming, they kind of like microtransaction where you'll buy the game for $10 and then they'll keep trying to sell the kid more items and the kid has to keep go back to his parents. Can I get $10, $7, $8? Next thing you know, you paid like $400 on one game. What do you guys think about that?
Oh,
I mean, again, I can only speak to say that, we strive to make games that are really high quality, and I will say that not all games are created equal. That's another thing I will say in terms of the gameplay experience and how they're monetized as well, that you kind of alluded to. I know that with the games that we make, it's, I touched on this earlier with ads, but even with the gameplay experience, it's always about the player first and how can there be a really high level of care and craft into the storytelling and the gameplay aspect so that it's a really positive experience. And that's something that we take really seriously in terms of making sure that the experience is one that's positive. But so again, yeah, that's from our perspective. But I will say that I do think not all games are created equal, and that's why you see kind of that disparity, I think, in some of the experiences for different people.
I also think that there's usually something else going on, or some other need that's not being met. If this child, especially if it's a really young person who maybe doesn't have the supervision they need or don't have the resources they need, and this is the only thing they have access to, it does come down to the parents or to the community around this person and recognizing, unhealthy behavior, unhealthy habits, which can manifest themselves in all kinds of ways. And gaming is just one of them. So I think when you see a hyper focus or things like that on anything, especially in a child, that usually means that there's something else, that maybe needs to be met, or you work with it and you figure out why this is the thing for that kid, because maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe this is, serving a need or purpose in their life creatively. If someone had told Bill Gates that him spending all his time messing with these computers and things like that, he's doing too much of that, he needs to go back to school, he needs, then we wouldn't be where we are with those technologies. So I think that a lot of people in our country try and put gaming at the forefront of a lot of controversy, but you'll find in other countries where they have the same amount, if not more, gamers present, won't have the same issues that we do in our country in particular. So I think in a lot of cases we're talking about mental health and other issues that allow our habits for some reason in our country kind of to take look a little bit different than they do in some other places.
I definitely want to chime in here, and I swear we didn't talk about this before, because part of our thing that we built is the ability to own your assets, right? You talked about microtransactions, and so I strongly believe if you pay for it, you should own it. And then you can also resell it. Why shouldn't that be the case in a digital world, right? So then if you make all this money, and this is even good for the big companies, because even in the secondary market, you make money. So there's opportunity to evolve that after we get over that stigma of the whole Web3 world. And we're getting there slowly, but that is one solution. And I'm with my panel here when it comes to the actual responsibilities of parents also, when we're talking about kids, right? As Jamie said, I mean, there's so many things where you can fall into a very unhealthy habit, and that might also just be watching movies all night long. So anything in short instances, in short bursts, can be cool, can be great. Too much of it is bad for you. So really controlling that as a parent's responsibility, and as you grow older, obviously as your own responsibility, and hopefully you have a great circle of friends who tell you, hey guy, you got to go get out more, right? We're going to go into a bar or something outside. Yeah. Hopefully you have these friends then around you. Thank you for the question. Really good question. Love it.
Sorry to put that on me.
That's good.
That's good stuff.
The lady over here.
Hi, thank you so much for your insightful talk. My name is Yuki, and I have two questions. The first is, how do you think the release of the shows Arcane and The Last of Us has impacted the gaming industry? And considering this, have you observed any particular shifts, like small or big, in the way that larger gaming companies innovate and use their creative resources? Thank you.
I mean, I feel like the story in gaming this year has been, it's also the kind of thematic of this panel, is about how gaming has captured kind of Hollywood's attention and streaming services' attention. You mentioned The Last of Us, the Super Mario Brothers movie. Looking ahead, we've got the Fallout series that's coming to Amazon Prime next year. And so, I would say that Hollywood and gaming and movies and TVs, kind of trying to do remakes of games or entertainment forms around games is not necessarily new, right? We've seen that in the past with movies like Tomb Raider and Street Fighter and what have you. I think the difference that we're seeing this year that has led to the success of particularly Last of Us as an example, is there's a recognition and understanding about the power of storytelling within the game itself. And instead of kind of trying to take a game and mesh it into a format for a movie or a TV series and kind of create a story around it, these interpretations have been a lot more true to the actual game itself and recognizing the story, especially in The Last of Us, which is, there's so many emotional kind of storytelling touch points within that. And that what the TV series did really well was actually staying true to that rather than trying to take a concept and kind of, squish it into a different form. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen these adaptions, this year so much more successful than maybe they've been in the past. There's this level of kind of respect and understanding of the power of storytelling within gaming that I think wasn't there previously. In terms of shifts creatively, what that means from like a publisher perspective, I mean, the short answer is I would say there haven't been shifts that I've noticed, and that I think the storytelling aspect of gaming has always actually been really strong. The difference is that it just hasn't been recognized as such before.
Yeah, I love this. The question is great because it goes to the heart of our topic today, right? We had in the past really us as the gaming industry scratching the doors of the big executives in Hollywood and asking for IP. And now that has turned, right? Now the IP is being taken and it's been turned into great movies and or TV series. And just a quick note, I mean, I'm vegan, so I had a really complicated relationship for a moment here with mushrooms after this experience with The Last of Us. But it's great experience that are being built in game form and in show form.
Yeah, and I think like you touched on the idea of IP. And one of the things that we've seen in Hollywood especially is where have they been turning to for a lot of the IP in their movies? It's been comic book series. And that's kind of, I think running its course, so to speak. And so now they're turning their attention to gaming. And one of the reasons that IP is so valuable, and I was having this conversation earlier, it's really hard to create compelling, good IP, whether it's gaming, whether it's movies, whether it's TV series, but especially in gaming from scratch. If you're able to repurpose, IP, and again, this is why you've seen the success of the Marvel movies and what have you, is because folks already have an emotional connection to it. They already have a touch point with it. They're already familiar with it, even if, there's varying levels of that connection. And so that's why you've seen that happen. And so I think, part of it is that shift now where Hollywood is now recognizing the power of gaming IP. And there's a whole treasure trove of gaming IP that they can now kind of mine to create, exciting new content.
So we have time for 2 quick last questions. Bronson, I'll let you choose. Jen. Here we go.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone. I'm Simon Applebaum. I'm the producer and host of Tomorrow Will Be Televised. It's the promo about television's current and future. We're on tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific on Blog Talk Radio and on podcast. And by the way, on tomorrow's program, we're going to lead off. This is a recommendation. In case you don't know, Hasbro has just launched a Dungeons & Dragons Adventure channel. And we will have the Hasbro executive that is in charge of that. That'll be our first guest tomorrow. But what I want to get into is one of the stories that we've been following all year long, and that is the major play by smart TV set makers and smart device makers to offer video games that you can play on the television set without a console, without a PlayStation, without an Xbox. Samsung, for example, along with LG, now have game hubs where you can play, in Samsung's case, several thousand games, including Fortnite, including Twitch, either using your voice remote, or a joystick that you aim at the TV set because of the artificial intelligence that's built into the set or the device. If you have Roku, you can now play Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy anytime you like on the television set. There's an organization called Next Playground that's going to be starting next month, offering through a plug-in in the TV set games and experiences you can play by yourself with others by using your body or body language. So I'm wondering, Claire, what does Activision, Blizzard, and Microsoft have to say about this? How are you sort of monitoring what's going on, and when do you folks get into this growing field of games you play on the TV set?
Yeah, I won't comment specifically in terms of Activision Blizzard and Microsoft's kind of business plans. I will just say that you're touching on kind of a theme that comes back to this point around accessibility. And I think you look at the future of gaming, and a lot of it points towards things like cloud gaming and that type of thing, where you don't need the consoles to access those types of games. So I think you're spot on in recognizing the direction that the industry is moving towards, which is giving greater accessibility to folks to game, whether they have a console or not.
Yeah, I think the collaboration with Samsung actually is Microsoft, right? That is the Xbox integration. So there's an Xbox Lite integrated into that smart TV. And I think, spot on. There's a new opportunity to grow the market in a new direction, similarly to the smartphones open up gaming to the gaming console in your pocket, right? Now we have it in every living room. And so if you don't want to have that clunky Xbox or PS5 standing in your living room, then hey, now you have it in your TV. It's great innovation. Are you excited as an actor about this?
I mean, you got rid of the cable box, so it makes sense that that's coming next.
The center of home entertainment. Thank you. Good question. Thank you very much. Last question. Go. Going through the pit.
It's like a video game
Hello,
challenge,
everyone.
Hey.
Jump across.
I'm sorry, it's not question, but I'm Benji, everyone, and I think I'm teacher, but acting teacher, and I'm acting coach, but I'm thinking it's new teacher is games. Exactly, I'm filmmaker, director, but it's new movies is games. I think I'm film video editor. It's all time I use the computer in my life. And I'm the gamer, and I learn many some things in the games, exactly. And I'm here today, and I'm experienced, and I'm talk exactly all night. It's my life exactly, not too different. I don't learn tonight anything, but I'm real, and everything is true tonight. It's future is games, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Benji. That's a great end statement. I applaud you for that. Well, that leads us to the conclusion, and I think Benji phrased it perfectly. Well, I want to say, the box office versus boss battle, where we left off here is really that the future of gaming is bright. We have a lot of opportunity. There is creative, it's an art form. We have the largest mainstream subculture existing here, and I think we can all agree that everybody here in this room and everybody also outside should at least consider getting into gaming, and maybe also consider changing the point of view, the aspect, the viewpoint on gaming a little bit, and open their eyes to what's out there. And specifically, get out there and play some of the new games. The experiences are incredible. And then seeing what brands are going to do in the future, I think we will see a lot of fantastic integrations there. So with that, I want to conclude. I want to thank you both, Claire and Jamie, for being here and really kicking off our first video game panel. Thank you very, very much. You were amazing, and hopefully we can get you back in the future here and talk more about this. First and foremost, a round of applause. Thank you very much for it. So for next month, we'll not have a panel for December here for the Game Changers Collective. We will probably do, and if this all works out with a mutual friend of ours, then we might have like a Zoom conference, and then also that will go on YouTube. But again, I want to encourage all of you to scan the code, log in, and then also follow us on LinkedIn or become part of our LinkedIn group. You get all the information, all the the book recommendation, the gamer recommendation, all of that, access to our panelists where possible, and then also sign up for our newsletter so you know what's happening next, and you get the recording also of this panel here in your inbox. And then again, I want to thank Spring Place here. Susanna's in the back. Thank you very much for supporting us here for this beautiful space. You'll also get an email with some more information about Spring Place. Thank you very much, Vincent here for Wava Water. Delicious as always. Thank you very much. If you have more information that you would like to, or more that you would like to know about Wava, here is Vincent in the back, and then will join us also for the evening. Flowcode here with our code directly, and then also all in all that supported us tonight. So last thing, in my own personal interest, there is a next year, 2024, very fast approaching, and it's a year of a big vote. So this is a personal note from my side. Whoever is American, who is American citizen, please register, please go out and vote. Doesn't matter what your political direction is, just make your vote count. It's important. There's nothing, you have to convince me otherwise if you have a different thought, there's nothing in the world that influences your life more than politics on a daily basis. So please, go out and vote. And with that, I thank you very much. Outside is a party going on. So this is Sunset Social. So please stay for a drink, mingle, make new friends, and yeah, have fun tonight. Thank you for all for coming here.